Welcome to Understanding Communication, Strategies and Tips for Communicating with a Person Living with Dementia. This webinar is designed for people affected by dementia, primarily for those caring for or connected to someone who is living with dementia, but also for those who are living with dementia themselves. Some of the information may not be applicable to your current situation, but may become more relevant in the future as the disease progresses. If you have questions or concerns, I encourage you to connect with the First Link Dementia Helpline at 1-800-936-6033. The number will also come up on the final slide. You are likely aware that communication involves much more than words. Some other ways that we communicate are through pitch and tone of our voice. This communicates our emotion and authenticity. If I were yawning and speaking in a slow manner that indicated that I was bored, you would be unlikely to listen to the rest of this recording. It would indicate to you that I wasn't engaged with what I was doing, and you would be much less likely to believe anything I said. We also communicate through nonverbal body language, through our posture, body positioning, gestures, touch, facial expressions, and through our eyes. This always makes me think of a friend's son who, when his mom told him with a scowl that she wasn't angry with him, responded, "Well, why don't you tell your face?" Our nonverbal communication speaks as loudly as, and sometimes much louder than, our words. Over the next several slides, we'll look at a number of different communication strategies. Some will resonate with you or for you, and some will not. Some will work today and not tomorrow, or the other way around. Each person with dementia is unique. The damage that their brain is experiencing and the way that damage impacts their abilities, their memories, and their communication abilities will be individual to them. Some of these strategies may not be relevant to you depending on the stage of the dementia, and as mentioned, they may become more applicable as the disease progresses. Use what is useful and ignore what is not. And come back to this recording over the coming months and years to try different strategies. To start, there are a couple of more widely applicable strategies. Reinforce remaining abilities. This picture was taken at one of our Minds in Motion programs, which is very much designed to reinforce remaining abilities. Whenever possible, focus on what the person can still do, rather than on what they have lost. Try not to remind them that they have forgotten. This only points out their deficits and might make them feel angry or insecure. If you are asking the person with dementia to do a task that involves multiple steps, try to give directions one step at a time in order to set them up for success. There will be times when you discover that the person with dementia can no longer do something on their own. You may feel that it is time for you to start doing it for them. First, try doing it with them. Break down the steps and explain or provide cues as you go. It may well be that they can still do it, but they might need a little help along the way. Many of the people who are living with dementia who have spoken with us have told us nothing about us without us. So ask if they need a little help. Like everyone, people with dementia have good days and bad days. The person may be able to do something or remember something one day, but not the next. If possible, try to watch for patterns over time and write down your observations. You may discover that certain times of the day are better than others, and other factors like pain or fatigue can help explain some of the fluctuations. Emphasize their past accomplishments. Reminisce about their past accomplishments rather than focusing on their current losses. For many people living with dementia, memory of the past is more accurate and accessible than short-term memory. Remind them of what they did well in the past rather than what they struggle with in the present. When trying to communicate with someone with dementia, especially if the communication seems difficult, set the stage for success. People living with dementia may have a short attention span and may experience difficulty filtering out other noises in the environment, such as traffic or other conversations. Too much activity around the individual can also make it difficult for them to concentrate, so it may be necessary to move to a quieter place, or at the least, to minimize background noise. Turn off or turn down radio, TV, and try to minimize other distractions. Make sure the person has their glasses, their hearing aids if they need them. Make sure they're comfortable, that they're not distracted by being too hot or too cold, or by the discomfort of being without their dentures, or by having a bright light shining directly in their eyes. Get the person's attention. Approach from the front. A person with dementia may experience loss of peripheral and up and down vision. That is, the person may only be able to see clearly straight ahead, and they may startle if approached from the side or behind. Approach slowly and calmly, no rushing. Remember that the person's brain is likely to be processing information more slowly than yours. If you are approaching an individual who is upset or emotional, it can help to establish a calm, caring atmosphere. Your very calmness may help to settle the person. Be very aware of your body language. Use touch when appropriate. For example, a gentle pat on the shoulder or the forearm to get their attention. And call them by name. Respect who they are. No elder speak. Ask the person if they would like your help. Sometimes they just want a little more time. Position yourself for eye contact. Establish and maintain eye contact, and to do that, it's very helpful to face the person directly when speaking. This may require you to sit or crouch to be at eye level. While you're communicating, assess what their body language is telling you. Is this a good time? Do they recognize you? Do they feel threatened or afraid? And again, it's important to be aware of your own body language, such as gestures, facial expressions, and posture. As human beings, we are very, very good at reading facial expressions. Try not to take things personally. Remember, it is the disease that is happening in the brain that is causing symptoms. The person with dementia is not doing or saying things on purpose. When the person living with dementia says or does things that are hurtful, try to mentally and or visually separate the disease from the person. You may even give the disease a name, ALS, for example. When difficult or hurtful things happen, you can say, ALS did it. One of the caregivers in a caregiver support group said, I just imagine the letters A-D in front of my wife's face. It's Alzheimer's disease speaking to me, not my wife. It's the disease talking. You can't argue or reason with a disease. Speak slowly and clearly. You may in fact need to speak so slowly that it seems awkward or uncomfortable for you. But remember that the person living with dementia is processing information more slowly than they did before. Be aware of your tone of voice. What is it saying about your emotions? If it may be communicating anger or frustration, can you take a breath and regroup before you engage in communication? Lower pitch may be easier to hear, especially if the person has some hearing loss. Higher pitch can be more difficult to understand and may signal that we're upset. Our voice tends to rise in pitch and speed when we get concerned or upset. And so a low, slow tone of voice suggests that everything is okay. Use simple, short, familiar words and phrases, and as the disease progresses, avoid abstract sayings. Pronounce your words clearly. Try to be as positive and reassuring as you can be. You won't be perfect all the time, so don't be too hard on yourself if you have bad days. No one gets it right all of the time. Share one message at a time. Present one idea at a time. You may have to allow the person time to absorb one sentence before moving on to the next. Break tasks into small, simple steps. And again, this is something that will need to be done more as the disease progresses. Obviously, early in the disease, the person may not need this, but it is something that over time, as you see perhaps an increasing frustration when you give instructions or difficulty with following instructions, you may need to break it down and take long pauses in between to allow the person living with dementia time to process the information. Do they understand? Try also not to overwhelm the person with too many choices. One or two clear choices maximum so that they have an easier time of choosing. For example, rather than, "What would you like for lunch?" it may be more helpful to say, "Would you like a soup? Would you like soup or a sandwich for lunch?" If the choice is sandwich, you can go on to say, "Would you like tuna or roast beef?" Use your knowledge of the person and their likes and dislikes to help you narrow down the choices for them. Show as you talk. Use cues and gestures to demonstrate and clarify your words. Remember, it is possible for the person to have lost their ability to understand the meaning of words, but they may recognize the object or task if they see it. If you need the person to do something, demonstrate it by using nonverbal communication whenever possible. For example, in this picture, also taken at one of our Minds in Motions, it's pretty clear to see, even just from the photo, what it is that the Minds in Motion coordinator is explaining to a client. Another example, if you're asking a person to sit down, point to the chair. It may also be helpful to sit down next to them. And try to stay positive and patient. Often the person with dementia is looking for a sense of safety, comfort, and reassurance as they experience a loss of control over thoughts, feelings, and confidence. While it's not always possible to be patient and positive, practicing good self-care will help you succeed more often. We often hear from caregivers that they lose patients more often when they are tired. Getting a good rest, taking breaks, and accepting help are all ways caregivers can maintain their strength. It may be helpful to use close-ended questions. That is, those questions that have a yes or no answer. Instead of, "What would you like for breakfast?" you may want to ask, "Would you like toast for breakfast?" Allow sufficient time for the person to interpret the question and find the answer. If they seem stuck, ask them if they would like you to help them with their choice. Allow plenty of time for a response. It may take a while for the person to gather his or her thoughts. This one is tied closely to the previous point in that whenever possible, ask if the person would like help in finding a word, finishing a sentence, or telling a story. They may be relieved to have the help, or they may feel that they want some more time to try and remember on their own. This is particularly effective when the person has insight and can reflect on their own wants and needs. It's definitely more difficult later in the disease when the person has limited insight or has lost insight and is unable to understand that there is anything wrong with them at all. Use humor when appropriate. Many caregivers and people living with dementia say to us, "If you don't laugh, you'll be crying all the time." Laughing can certainly help both caregivers and people with dementia through very difficult times. It can bring light to frustrating situations, and it can also tighten or maintain bonds between family members and persons living with dementia when it feels like the disease is continuing to pull them apart. Often there are those little family inside jokes that stay with someone for very, very long in the disease. It can help them feel connected to the family. There could, however, be situations when the person with dementia is feeling very angry, frustrated, or afraid, and humor may not be understood or appreciated in those moments. Caregivers, look for nonverbal signs as to whether humor would be an appropriate strategy in the moment. Pay close attention to what you know about your person. Abstract humor will be particularly difficult for the person to understand as they lose executive function. Listen carefully and respond to feelings, not stories. Because for truly hearing and listening, we need to use our ears, our eyes, and our minds. Sometimes there's nothing you can do to solve the issue at hand. For example, if a person wants to go home when they are already home. Or sometimes what the person with dementia is asking for is not possible. For example, wanting to visit a family member who has long ago passed away. One strategy that might help in these situations is to validate the person with dementia's feelings rather than trying to respond to their requests or their stories. The content of the communication doesn't matter so much as the feelings behind it. For example, if someone says, "It's been a really long time since I've seen you," or worse, "You haven't been to visit me in months," it's really important to pay attention to the feelings behind the content. The feelings are always right, even if they are about stories that are not objectively real. In this case, "You haven't been to see me," it may be that the person is feeling lonely and are missing you. You may be the anchor in what feels like pretty stormy and confusing seas. Rather than launching into an explanation of the fact that you were just there on Friday or yesterday or whenever, It's much better to respond along the lines of, "It feels a really long time to me too. It's really good to see you today." Watch for nonverbal cues, facial expressions, and body language. Do those things match their words? If not, what are they trying to tell us? And that ties closely into the next point. Connect, don't correct. That is, don't argue. It's a lose-lose situation. Both parties will be frustrated, and neither will be right in the end because the argument is taking place in two separate realities. A better strategy is to try and join the person with dementia in their reality as much as possible. While it is always best not to argue, this strategy will be easier in some cases and more difficult in others, depending on the nature of the thoughts or ideas behind the exchange. It may be easy to agree in some cases, like if the person with dementia is hallucinating and he or she is pleased by the kittens they see in the room, as opposed to if the person is accusing people of stealing from them and is very angry and afraid because of it. In difficult situations, the right thing to say might be whatever works to comfort the person with dementia in the moment. For example, if the person feels that you forgot to tell them about a doctor's appointment, it's better to apologize to them and acknowledge that they feel frustrated. That's their reality. Than it is to try and convince them that you've told them several times. That's your reality. You may say something like, "I can see how frustrated you are. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you before. I thought that I had. But the doctor is really hard to get in to see, and I'm hoping we can still go. Can I help you get ready?" It can be very difficult to take the blame for things, and it can help if you can imagine putting on a Teflon coat, an imaginary Teflon coat, so that nothing will stick to you. And it can help to blame other people. For example, the doctor said you have dementia, or the health authority has said that you need to attend the adult day program, or the Department of Motor Vehicles said that you need a driving test. As the primary care partner, you can often be the focus of all of the anger and frustration from the person with dementia. It needs to be a conscious discipline to push all the negative changes onto others and away from yourself, thus allowing you to be the helper, the comrade, and the number one ally. Avoid talking about them in front of them. This comes back to the nothing about us without us. Remember that their ability to understand what is happening around them and what is being said may be quite high, even if they have lost the ability to communicate through words and sentences. You may want to refer to the section on communication, understanding communication, dementia, and the brain, where it talks about the difference between receptive and expressive aphasia. The person may be able to understand that you are talking about them in front of them. If the person says something like, "I'm right here," or "I'm not stupid," it may mean that they feel excluded from the conversations that would normally involve them. If you have ever been in a hospital, you may have experienced this yourself when doctors and nurses discussed your medical situation and needs, standing right over your bed, but not including you in the conversation. So if at all possible, try to include them in the conversation and try to speak to them directly through eye contact and nonverbal language. However, try to avoid open-ended questions like, "Well, what do you think of that, Hank?" Repeat or try again later. That is, if you're having difficulty understanding the person, Try repeating or rephrasing what they said, asking if you have understood correctly. This may help the person further clarify what they are trying to tell you. You may also want to try rephrasing your own question, or to come back and try again another time. And for some people, that can be simply stepping outside the room, taking a couple of breaths, and coming back in to try again. If someone's short-term memory has been very, very much impacted by the progression of the disease, simply removing yourself from sight and coming back may, in fact, there may be no memory of the first time. So trying another time doesn't necessarily need to mean trying a long time later. When a person with dementia is upset and they're asking for something that is unrealistic, what they may be asking for is comfort, safety, and reassurance. And so providing a positive distraction might be helpful. After validating their feelings, you might want to try providing them with a positive distraction like a favorite food, soft music, a walk, to help get their minds off of what is upsetting them. Knowing the person's likes and dislikes is critical to finding the right distraction. Think about, what do they find soothing? What gives them a sense of comfort? Therapeutic fibbing can be a very difficult strategy for caregivers to practice because it may feel like you're lying to someone you care about. And that may cause you to feel guilty at first, but many caregivers tell us it does get easier with time. It's important to know that therapeutic fibbing is not the same as lying, because lying is deceitful, whereas therapeutic fibbing is an act of caring. You are telling the person with dementia what they need to hear to feel better in this moment, which is a powerful tool in helping them to create the least amount of stress. It helps them feel safe, comfortable, and cared for. Ask yourself, which alternative creates the least amount of stress for the person I'm caring for? Correcting them by telling them the truth, creating a therapeutic fib, saying nothing at all? Generally, people lie to cover up the truth, to protect themselves, or to get away with something bad. On the other hand, therapeutic fibbing protects the person with dementia from feelings of confusion, frustration, fear, and anxiety. It can take on many different forms, and it may mean just agreeing with them. Reality orientation, that is, trying to bring the person with dementia back into your reality, usually doesn't work. So what if their reality doesn't match yours? What's the worst that would happen if you just agreed with them? Can you let your reality go and try to become a part of their reality by just going along with them? For example, if your mother calls you by her brother's name or insists that you are her brother or her father, does it really matter that she isn't recognizing your external package changes in that moment? What may be important is that she clearly recognizes that you are a family member. She recognizes that you are someone who is important to you. Maybe just go along. It may mean taking the blame for something you didn't do or blaming a third party. Rather than blaming the person with dementia for forgetting something, can you take the blame for not telling them? Or rather than you take the blame for the person losing their driver's license, can you blame it on the doctor or the government, as the examples we already talked about? You could say, for example, I took your car to the shop for a tune-up, It'll be ready tomorrow. How about I drive today? It may look like revisiting things the way they have been in the past. The person with dementia may be living in a reality that corresponds to their childhood or early adulthood. If what they are saying or doing doesn't correspond to your reality in the present, could it be that they are remembering people, places, and things from their past? Reassuring the person in whatever way works. As dementia progresses, people lose both their ability to remember things from the recent past, as well as their ability to look forward into the future. Remember, this is a result of the physiological changes in the brain. As a result, the focus of their reality is very much in the now. Remember that the goal of therapeutic fibbing is to provide comfort and safety in the moment. You may have to say whatever will work in the moment to help the person feel better, even if it is untrue or you cannot deliver on it. Or it may be saying nothing at all, simply allowing them to say what they need and not to react. For people living with dementia, events from the distant past are often better remembered than those that occurred after or shortly before the onset of Alzheimer's disease. It can be very helpful to think about our age line and to think about where on that age line the person currently is in their own reality. Are they perhaps 65 and recently retired? Are they 55 and sending their child to college? Are they caring for a young child or a baby? Are they a young child themselves with living parents? Figuring out where they are on their age line can help us understand what they say and do, as well as their needs. Discussing earlier life events can orient, comfort, and soothe, as long as you are responding appropriately. If they ask for someone and you say, "Oh, they've gone to work," and they think, let's say, for example, they ask about you, and you say, "Well, I'm right here. This is Lori." They may think, "No, absolutely not." If they feel that they are in their 30s, for example, and the person that they are looking for, the child they are looking for, is in fact a child or a baby themselves, then it is of no value for you to say, "Well, I'm Lori," because clearly you are not a child or a baby in that moment. So it can be helpful to engage in a bit of conversation that helps you identify where in their age line they are before you begin to respond. So once again, if you have questions about any information that you've heard today or any other questions about living with dementia, please don't hesitate to call our First Link Dementia helplines. We have an English dementia helpline, 1-800-936-6033. We have Cantonese and Mandarin available at 1-833-674-5007. We have Punjabi available at 1-833-674-5003. And as always, you can go to our website and particularly look at the section called Living with Dementia, where you will find links to tips for communicating with a person with dementia and different types of communication strategies.